So I think we can get started. Everyone's okay with that? I like to take the group conscience. Everybody's good with starting a hair early. If anybody comes in, we have chairs.
Yeah, it's at 1:45.
Really? So I apologize for that because I was under the understanding that we were going to kind of fellowship for that 15 minutes, but we can't start at 1:45 moving forward. We'll make an announcement on that.
My mistake, because you said you wanted 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after.
Yes.
And I did 1:45 to 3:15. It should have been 1:45 to 3:30.
So that's why. That's okay. That's why everyone's looking at me. So we're off to an uncomfortable start, but we'll get through that. So first, I want to thank everybody for coming. This is really. It's a gift that I get to do that people would even want me to go through this book with them, okay? And it's a testament to God, and it's testament to the 12 steps and, the experiences that I've been going through. So I just want to kind of start this off with something that this isn't something that I regularly do, okay? It is something that I do go out and I do speak places and I do speak in front of meetings, but I don't necessarily take people, except for sponsees that I actually take through the book. I've never really done anything like this before. So I just ask that everyone kind of be patient with me, right? So one of the things that I really think that I want to come out, especially this first one, is to give you my experience of how did I end up here, really, more than anything else, so that everybody here, and I'm a pretty open book. Most people here do know that sometimes I probably share more than I should. But it's just, I wear it on my sleeve, and I'll get emotional. I'm getting emotional already before we even started. It's just something that happens through this process. I'll fight through that, okay? And one of the main things that I want us to kind of understand as we go through this is if you're not uncomfortable through this process, then I probably didn't do my job, okay? So understand that that's one of the goals that I'm going to try to, as we go through this book, is for us to feel that uncomfortableness of where maybe we can make some changes in our lives. Because for me, that's the only time I've ever experienced growth, right? It's when I get through the pain that I get to experience God. When I get through the pain is when, all of a sudden, I see things differently, right? I wear a new pair of glasses. So I'm going to refer back to, so kind of everybody knows what I'm doing. I'm going to keep referring back to some notes that I have here. I'm going to be using two books. Obviously, the book that we talked to everybody about, okay? So a couple things. This book is the reason that this book exists, okay, to be fair. And the reason that this book exists, a lot would be the Bible. So it's really, really important that we understand that, okay? So when I refer back to the big book, it's not that I'm driving people to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's that there's a miracle that happened for this book to be written, and he was aware of it. And he saw it, and he really, dug deep into it, and I think does a tremendous job in talking about what the steps can do for everybody, okay? So really, I talked about the uncomfortability, right? I hope that happens. I hope that everybody kind of leaves through this process of feeling uncomfortable. And if it gets really uncomfortable and you want to talk to me outside of here, please do so. Do so, because I'm not going to tell you that I can help you, right? One of the things that I always have to be careful of, and one of the things that I've experienced is I don't do this, right? This is God's work. I don't help get people sober. I don't help get people drunk. I don't help people get to God, right? I just work as a soldier and do what I did to have the experiences that I have, and that's all I could share with you. So I encourage people that if they do start to feel that uncomfortability and they want to go a little bit deeper into a certain area. So today is not really going to be that, okay? I'm going to talk to you kind of about the beginning of the book. I'm going to give you my experience and how I ended up here. And then starting next week, we'll really get deeper into the book. And then there's going to be some uncomfortability, okay? So I'm going to prep you that ultimately maybe you don't want to come next week. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. So I encourage everybody to come next week. I think that you'll see that through that process is and let me tell you a couple ways that I use this book, right? So I've listened to this book, I don't know, 10 times probably in my car, right? I use Audible a lot. I drive a lot, so I listen to the book. I also have read the book a few times. I'm trying to have a new experience with this book as we go through this, all right? So that has been my experience with this book, All right, my experience with this book is, just like the Bible, that every time you read it, something pops off the pages and hits you. That's been my experience with this book. My experience has been that I go through this with somebody else and I learn something that I never knew, even though it was right in front of me over and over and over again. I'm having that experience with this. So I am basically trying to, as the weeks go on, not get too far ahead of the book, which wasn't my plan. Just so everybody kind of understands how the changes that even happened in my life that I encourage to happen in everyone else's life is that I had a plan to do all this. That plan's out the window. God has a different plan, right? I planned to go to Florida 2 weeks ago, do an outline through this whole book, read this whole book. Was not what happened, okay? And I'm so glad it didn't happen because I now am experiencing this book a little bit differently, all right? So that's what we're gonna, that's what we're gonna do. I'll kind of tell you where I'm at and I'll reference the book, but ultimately we're not here to read a book. We're here to have an experience, okay? And I want to make that clear with everyone here because sometimes when you do things like this, people are so tied to the text and what's in the book that we're missing. This whole design of the 12 steps is to get us to the treasure of living in the sunlight of the Spirit, living in the kingdom of God. That's what the goal is. It's not about worship in Richard Rohr. It's not about worship in this book. To be fair, it's not about worship in the Bible. It's about living in a different experience, okay? So I'm gonna start with a song which almost ended up not happening. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about music real quick. So when I ended up at Good Shepherd, you could see, I was almost crying a few minutes ago, that I was having these experiences with music, right? I was being touched by the words of music, and I learned that music was really getting me present. Okay, because I can't shut this mind down. And if I could start to pay attention to the words, all of a sudden, the crazy thoughts that are going through my head start to quiet. And it's changed my meditation life. It's actually led me to different ways that I meditate today. Okay, I don't necessarily use music all the time anymore, but I needed that initially. So, so this song, I'm gonna be like Drew and get choked up. So, someone, just to give you the backstory, somebody sent me this song and said, look, I watched your life change, and I think this is why I changed. They knew nothing about the 12 steps. They just knew that I was what I was and what I became. So I'm going to play that song. And bear with me, all right, if I keep crying. It'll go away, I promise.
What do you know, I'm living right. It took a while and some sleepless nights, but I finally turned myself to the light, and I'm really moving on. People say I cleaned up good, now I'm doing better than I know I should. I should be dead in all likelihood, but instead I'm writing you to say how much I know I truly let you down. And I know I never was a real good man like you have now. And I'm so sorry for the wreckage and damage that I've done. See, you never knew I was just 12 steps away from the man that I've become. In steps 1 and 2, 3, I prayed God would get me through. 4 and 5 were so hard to do, but the good Lord knows I did it. Shift 6 changed how I looked at things. Now I finished 7 in early spring. 8 made a list of people I'd done wrong. So tonight I'm writing you to say how much I know I truly let you down. And I know I never was a real good man like you have now. And I'm so sorry for the wreckage and damage that I've done. See, you never knew I was just 12 steps away from the man that I've become. I'm learning more and more each and every day. And one day they say that I can give it all away, but until then, I'm writing you to say how much I know I truly let you down. And I know I never was a real good man like you have now. And I'm so sorry for the wreckage and damage that I've done. See, you never knew I was just 12 steps away from the man that I've become.
So yeah, so someone sent me that song one day. I guess about, I don't even know, 2-3 years ago. Someone who, you know, saw the changes in my life and just knew that I was going to AA. That's all he knew. He didn't know anything, and he said, you know, he was basically asking me a question. He was wondering if this is, you know, what AA was about. So, and I can tell you that my answer to that question would probably change and has changed over the course of time, right? So how does this all come together? Because that's really what we're here to do, right? We're not here because, I mean, let's face it, and maybe there are some alcoholics in this group. That's fine. But that's not why we're here, right? We're here to have a relationship and deepen our relationship with God and like I said, live in the sunlight of the Spirit. So one of the things that I think Richard Rohr does tremendously is he talks about, let me actually go back for a second. So if you read the 12 steps or you know nothing about the 12 steps, that's fine, okay? What I would tell you, though, if you read the 12 steps that exist, right? So these 12 steps that were written, they're used in Overeaters Anonymous, they're used in Gamblers Anonymous, they're used in Narcotics Anonymous, they're used in Al-Anon. They are a set of tools that have been a source of recovery in so many areas. So it's not just about the alcoholic and the drug addict, right? So one of the most important things I think to know about the 12 steps is we only talk about alcohol, drugs, or gambling or overeating in the first half of step 1. Right, I'm powerless over an Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I'm powerless over alcohol, and then my life has become unmanageable. Narcotics Anonymous, I'm powerless over drugs, and my life has become, and vice versa. So it's really, really important to understand what Richard Rohr did. He basically said, well, if we could lose that first half and plug something else in there, because he believes that we all have some type of an addiction, whether it be an addiction to our thoughts or whatever it may be, that then we could utilize these tools to get to this place, okay? And Bill Wilson, who is credited, let's say, with writing the 12 steps, which isn't necessarily accurate, but he is kind of credited with that. Sorry, my eyes, I'm leaking here. So he didn't figure this out. That's what I'm going to tell you, okay? I did a few weeks ago or a few months ago, I actually went through the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and did a little thing on Zoom, and I'll probably do something like that later on. But when the divinity of how this all happened is amazing, and there's no way that he had the foresight where he was in his recovery, because I'm going to tell you right now, they say that he really started writing this book. He was sober about 3 years when they started the printing and writing of this book. And I'll tell you that, I recently in January celebrated 5 years, and I can tell you that in in year 3, I wasn't going to be capable of sitting down and writing most of what he wrote. Okay, he was a brilliant writer, and there was a lot of people that helped him and added to this book. He is credited with it, though, to be fair. Okay, so what we really talk about is we talk about the spiritual malady, right? That one of the misconceptions, especially that we have in society, is that when somebody has a drug or alcohol or food or whatever that problem is, they believe that that's the problem. When in actuality, the way we look at it and the way that Richard Rohr looks at it and the way that hopefully when we're done, you're going to look at it also, that's actually the solution to the problem. Okay, the problem exists before the drugs and alcohol. The problem exists before we pick up the drink, the drug, the food, the credit card, whatever it is that's causing unmanageability in your life. That happens. That actually becomes the not the problem. That becomes the solution to the problem, because that's what's giving me ease and comfort that I want to seek from God. Okay, the alcoholic or the drug addict, and I'm going to always go back to that just because that's where my experience is, picks up the drink or the drug to seek ease and comfort that you can get from having a relationship with God. You can get from living in the kingdom of God, right? Some people, experience that come to Good Shepherd. It's an amazing thing to experience, okay? And we kind of went into that in that last session. I mean, me and Drew were talking about, Eleanor talking about how she feels in the kingdom of God, right? Like she lit up when she talked about that day, right? Me and Drew had a conversation about it. Like it is something that when you see somebody in it and you've been there, you can see it on them. There's an awareness that is it's a beautiful thing, right? It's almost like that somebody's, I'll give you an example, right? If I don't know, I'm going to give you a silly example, but let's say you went to Disney World, right? I don't care who you are. Most people, you go to Disney World, you walk down Main Street, you look at the castle, you feel like a kid. There's an experience. There's something special there. Well, when you have a conversation about that with somebody, usually you can kind of feel it again. Like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that walk up Main Street. I remember seeing Cinderella's castle. I mean, I got young kids, so I was there last year, so it's a little more present to me. But that same experience happens with people that have, really experienced the kingdom of God and have lived in the sunlight of the Spirit. And for me, that changes, right? There's days where I really feel plugged in, and there's days where I don't feel plugged in. So don't be discouraged if, you've experienced that and you're having trouble. What I could tell you is it's usually something blocking you. All right, and that's been my experience, right? 99% of the time, there's something blocking me from that connection, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what the steps do. The steps do is clear the blockage, right? One of the first times that I worked with a sponsor, and I loved what he said, right? We were sitting in his kitchen, and it was like a doorway like that, and he said, listen, if I took all the furniture and I put it in front of that doorway, there would be no sunlight coming through there. Nothing's going to come through there. You're not even going to feel the warmth. Nothing. If we move all the furniture again, all of a sudden now that light comes out and that sunlight's going to shine through. And that's what we do in the 12 steps, right? We get to a process where we trust God, we clean house, and then the goal in the end is to help others. Now, where does help others come into this? Help others comes into it is that when I'm not in tune with living in the kingdom of God, and Richard Rohr hits it on the head, and I don't want to jump the shark because he talks about it in I believe, chapter 5, where he says that's the recipe. We get to see God in everybody else, and all of a sudden we experience God again. So sometimes when I feel that disconnect and I feel like, nothing's going right in my life and all these things, and for me, I've been given a blueprint. I've been given a formula, right? For me, I go, it's not just about helping another alcoholic, but I go and help somebody else, right? I just had an experience like this 2 days ago, and I'll share that experience, and then I'm going to get a little bit back to the outline because I want to stick to this. I just had a rough day at work, right? I was up in North Jersey. I was beat up, right? My thinking mind was telling me, maybe this job's not for you. right? You want to keep doing this. You want to be up here. You're like every little thing that can go through my mind was going through my mind. I mean, and for me, I don't know. I'm one of those people that can act on some of those things, right? I can really be compulsive, all right? You know, before you know it, I'm on the phone with my boss, and you know, a couple of years ago, I probably quit the job that moment, and then I'm begging for it the next day, right? So, with that said, right, I now have this set of tools, so I knew the move was to call somebody, right? Get on the phone with somebody. Now, I didn't call somebody because, right, my ego and pride are going to get in the way of me calling somebody and saying, hey, I'm in a bad place right now. I want to quit my job. I want to, you know, all these things. What I've learned is if I call somebody else who's really struggling, that I know is struggling, and I have a conversation with them, before you know it, all of that chatter, all that stuff goes away. And I've had that experience so many times now that I know that that's the formula for me. I know that when I'm, you know, letting that thinking mind destroy me, because that's what it'll do. My mind, first of all, me being an alcoholic and a drug addict, my mind wants to take me back to a drink or a drug. Okay, because that's where, if I am losing contact with God and not getting ease and comfort from God, well, it knows where I can get ease and comfort. It knows that. So it'll drive me right back there. Okay? So I have to be very, very in tune with that. And I would tell you that the more you become conscious of the thinking mind, the more you start to realize, whether you're a drug addict, alcoholic, whatever, right? And a lot of times, if that thinking mind is not aligned with helping others, God-centered, it's a dangerous place to be. Okay, I know some really, really good people in this world that thinking mind destroys them. And they're not drug addicts, they're not alcoholics, they're not, I mean, these are people that are successful, you know, in the terms of what society looks at, right? Wealthy, successful people that allow the mind to destroy them. Okay? So that's where this has all come for me, all right? Now, granted, through this process, there's been a number of different experiences I've had that people could say, right, spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, all things like that. And I'll talk a little bit further about that. And he talks about that in depth on the importance of having that in order to rid yourself of a lot of the stuff that's blocking you from that sunlight, okay? So I'm going to, I just thought it would be important with everybody that was here to kind of give you a quick little rundown. And believe me, I don't want to go too deep into it, but I just figured I would give you a little rundown. I kind of talked to Donna about this and said, look, you know, what do you think about me? Just telling people, like, how did I end up here? How did I end up sitting in a basement at Good Shepherd, you know, with my life the way it is? So I really grew up in a pretty good environment, right? My dad's a retired police officer. My mom's a retired teacher. Sometimes you guys see them at church. And I will get choked up during these. So anyway, you know, they did the best they could. I grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey, when Hoboken wasn't really what it is today. I grew up in like an apartment complex. And but I'm going to tell you, like, the more that I went through and dug deep into this process, the more I realized that there was this spirit, there was something that was making me feel different then. Okay, I was a pretty good athlete. I went on to play baseball in college. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I was I wouldn't be here, by the way. I'd be playing for the Mets right now if I was that good. But I was good enough to play at that next level, yet I left every game looking at the one thing that I did wrong. And it was, you know, just it got to a point where I didn't enjoy it. Like, I didn't even enjoy playing anymore. Even though it was like in my family, you were, you know, my grandfather had two brothers. So there were three siblings. They were all males. They all had two boys. So if you could kind of do that math, right? And they were either baseball players or musicians. I mean, that's what they were. So, and I wasn't really a good musician. So I went down the road of being a baseball player. And two of them got, you know, one played for the Twins and one played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So it was like everybody was invested in that, you know, hey, you're good at this, keep doing it. So for whatever reason, right? So my parents did the best they can, and they really did. But I'll give you a little backstory. You know, my parents hate when I tell this, but it's so important because some of you might have had this experience, right? My father was the fourth, the last child of four. His mother, who I would give anything to spend more time with my grandmother because she was this business savvy. She bought property in Hoboken. She was just one of these people that they, like my family had to hold her back because of what a drunk she was. And, because they thought her ideas were crazy. Meanwhile, her ideas probably weren't crazy. It's just she was crazy. And, and she drank herself to death. I mean, the story basically is my grandfather has a heart attack pretty early age. And they said, listen, you got to stop. I mean, she had money. She went down to Florida and they said, listen, if you pick up another drink, you're going to die. And she wasn't fortunate enough to get this. She really didn't know what was wrong with her, to be fair. Most of the people don't know what they're up against. They think they have a drinking problem. And they don't. They have a drinking solution. And they got to get to the problem. And they're set up for failure that way. So long and short of it, I don't think she really wanted to have my dad. My dad was little. It sounded like all the stories I hear from my family that nobody ever went to his games. Nobody, he lived a really, really tough life. And she would get drunk and embarrass him and destroy his, belongings and stuff like that. So I mention that because I think there was a lot of things that went on in my life because of the household that my father grew up in, right? And then my mother grew up in a household like that too. My grandfather would basically get drunk and have affairs and beat people up. And, when I heard the stories of that, which, listen, back then, this was common. I know that. I'm not telling you a story here that, I want anybody to, feel sorry for. Believe me, I'm just trying to give you a backstory of why I believe that a lot of the things that were going on in my household came from that, okay? I think that my mother still, till this day, lives a very fearful life because she was afraid of what was going to come through that door. She didn't know who was coming through. Was the guy coming through that was going to kick the shit out of everybody? Sorry. Or was the guy coming through that, was going to be, because my grandfather could be great. And I remember him drinking. I remember him being this Jekyll and Hyde, right? This somebody who could be very loving and fun. And then all of a sudden a switch would go off and he would, be this different person. And I got to watch him. It's funny, he got cancer of his mouth, and it was really unfortunate. They actually had to take some of his mouth out. So he couldn't drink anymore. And I watched somebody as miserable as you can live the rest of your life. I mean, because he lost his solution. And he didn't find God. So what was giving him ease and comfort, he couldn't, it was a sad situation. He could barely eat food. So he couldn't drink. It was like one of those things probably back for him to drink a Budweiser with a straw, even though, I got news for you, he might not have been as bad of an alcoholic as I was, because I'll tell you right now, if I was in the pain he was in, I would have figured out how to get that alcohol in me, to be fair. And so anyway, so that's really what goes on. And my parents, they sent me to a prep school. I went to an all-boys prep school, St. Peter's Prep, a Jesuit school in Jersey City. Which George will tell you recruits athletes, which is not true. Okay, so we're just a good group anyway.
All studying for the priesthood.
Yes, all studying for the priesthood, correct. So I didn't really come in contact with alcohol or drugs, right? My family owned a restaurant in Hoboken, like my extended family. They owned 2 restaurants in Hoboken. And that was kind of how you grew up. You started making coffee. Before you know it, you were bussing tables. Then you were waiting on tables. And it kept me in line, okay? I still had this spiritual malady, this discontent, okay? I wasn't happy with anything. I wasn't happy with getting good grades. I wasn't happy with being a good athlete. I wasn't happy with having a pretty girlfriend. Nothing was making me happy. But I was able to keep moving, okay? And, but I think the main reason why I didn't really pick up drugs or alcohol yet was because of the fear that my mother and my father, would constantly, look what alcohol did to these people, right? The joke used to be that my grandmother was on summer vacation at Betty Ford every summer. So every summer, my grandmother, I would see her for July and I wouldn't see her for August. right? We had a place up in upstate New York where the whole family would go. And my grandmother would be there in July, and then she would be gone in August. And now, I literally remember this as a little kid. And I remember they used to try to figure out how she got drunk because nobody was allowed to bring alcohol to the property and all these things. And they figured out that she was going to the supermarket, dumping out my Lanta bottles in the parking lot, filling them up with booze, and putting them in the fridge. And then she would sit at the pool and say that her stomach was bothering her while she was, drinking gin. I mean, she was creative. She was creative. But it was that fear that kept me away from drugs and alcohol. It really was, right? And then what happened was, right, when you have somebody tell you, and I'm really careful today, right? I'm raising 4 kids, and for somebody that don't know, I actually raised a stepdaughter, so I'm technically raised 5. Well, I'm in the process of raising 5 children. Fear tactics don't work when you get to overcome that fear. So what I mean by that is, right, they kept telling me how bad this thing was, right? This drugs and alcohol, it's going to kill you, it's going to ruin your life. And then when you have the drug and alcohol experience, and that experience doesn't kill you, that experience is actually magical. Bill Wilson says in his story, when you read his story, which is, I encourage everybody to read it, it's 16 pages, and you'll get an understanding of the destruction of what alcohol did to his life and how this all came about. He says, he uses the word like, I have arrived. So I don't know about anybody else in this room, but I don't know if anybody else has had that experience with alcohol, that they've arrived, right? Well, I can tell you I have, right? I have. So I was able to go up to Fairfield in Connecticut and play baseball, and I'll never forget. I had a handful of drinking incidents in high school, handful. Everyone led in, a catastrophe. So I should have known the writing was on the wall right there. But to be fair, I didn't have that experience yet. I was just trying it because my friends were doing it. And then I figured it didn't really work for me. Maybe my parents were right, to be honest. That's what started to come into the back of my head. And then I'll never forget the first night I was up at school. I had the Bill Wilson experience of, walking back at 7 o'clock in the morning. If anybody knows where Fairfield is, it's on the beach on the Long Island Sound. And we're basically, me and a group of guys are walking back. It's 7 in the morning. We've been drinking all night, and I had arrived, right? I had reached this thing was creating, there was no more fear in my life. There was no more, and I'm going to tell you, and this is scary, I played the best baseball I ever played that year, okay? I because it didn't matter to me no more. I went on the field, I let my natural ability go, and if I did bad, I was going to go get drunk. So slowly but surely, I lost all coping mechanisms, and, somebody who went to a prep school and did pretty well at this point, after 3 semesters at Fairfield was being asked to leave, okay? That's how fast this whole thing, sank, all right? And, and I was able to manipulate and lie. That's what alcoholics and drug addicts do. I was able to tell my parents that it was, a tough school and all these things. Where really what it was alcohol starting the process of destroying my life. And I come home, and anybody that knows Hoboken, right, I come home to basically the biggest bar town and the most bars per square mile. And my dad, who probably thought he was doing me a favor at the time because we really didn't know how bad this was going to be, was running a thing called the Bureau of Identification. So he was in contact with all the bar owners. And he said, look, my kid worked, and I was making martinis, and I was making drinks for gangsters in my family's restaurant when I was 15. I knew how to make drinks, and before you know it, I was 20 years old. And I was bartending, and then I was working in places down here, which is how I end up here. I was working down at Surf Club for a couple of years bartending. And I became, I actually thought that I was like a good drinker, because I was the guy early on that was drinking more than everybody else and was driving everybody around, and there was no consequences at this point, except for being thrown out of my school. That was the only consequence at this point. So, I couldn't be, because I'm going to tell you, God was working on me early, because God kept telling me and kept telling me in the back of my head, hey, look, maybe you're like your grandmother. I literally remember this whisper in my head that maybe, you're like your grandmother. And I would say, and I would have this argument, and I would say, no way. How could I be like my grandmother, right? I'm the one that takes everybody home. I wasn't a fall over drunk like she was, right? Because that's what I remember my grandmother. I remember my grandmother falling out of chairs and embarrassing the family. That wasn't me. And what ends up happening is, you know, to move this along, I end up start working in New York City, and I get introduced to drugs. And you want to talk about, you know, my dad was a narcotics detective. Okay, I was arrested. I was put in some really, really bad situations, and you know, I did things that I never thought I would do. And I ran the streets of New York City, and that was my life. And my whole family is police officers, so I embarrassed a lot of them. And long and short of it, I come down here. I kind of get my act together. I end up in a situation where, you know, God has been working in my life in so many areas when I look back, right? I end up in some program, and the program basically leads me down here. And I get clean and sober for a short period of time, but I still didn't believe I was an alcoholic. I just believed at this point that drugs were a problem in my life. And then, so I picked back up alcohol, and then eventually a couple of years later, I picked back up drugs. And I destroy a marriage, right? I was, some of you see my two oldest children, Ava and Jake, right? That they were with my ex-wife, who, you know, when I hear that song, that's all I think about, right? All I think about is you know, it's hard to not. My job is to never forget the past, but I also don't shut the door on it. And I believe me, I try to make living amends every single day in those, you know, in those experiences. But the things that those children missed out on, and that she missed out on, because there was a long period of time where I was not a husband, I was not a father, you know, I didn't show up. Let's put it that way. And what ends up happening is I go through a divorce, and now I really feel sorry for myself, okay? And now I start drinking again. And I'm in an apartment in Seaside by myself. Now I've become that drunk, right? I don't want anybody else with me. I don't want to be in a bar. I want to be alone. I don't want nobody to know what I'm doing. And that's it. I want to be isolated with the only thing that gives me comfort, which is drugs and alcohol. And I reached the point where I just didn't have the guts to kill myself. I really didn't. I didn't have the guts. But I would go to bed at night, which really I would call passing out. And I would just pray to God that I wasn't going to wake up. I really, you know, I get choked up when I think about it, because I remember those nights. I remember not being able to fall asleep because obviously, you know, I was doing different sorts of contraband that keep you awake. And I remember looking at the ceiling and just saying, God, please, when I pass out, to please just end this so I don't have to go back on this roller coaster again and you know, and go through another couple days of this, and through a crazy chain of events, right? And this is where everybody in this room, you'll hear me say it over and over again. What you think could be the worst thing that ever happens in your life, be careful of having attachment to that, because it could be the best thing that's happening in your life, okay? So I get a phone call, and my stepdaughter, Madison, that I raise, is at this point, who she shared her story here and celebrated about a year or two ago here, was a heroin addict and selling her body in Patterson, okay? And I get a phone call to go help her. Now, thank God, because of some of the connections that I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was able to make some phone calls. And even though, by the way, I am in the most pain, I'm in as much pain as her. The only difference is I don't have a body to sell, really, like she did, all right? Because I might have done that. So I end up getting her some help. And I am really, really, I'm at the end here, you know? But I do remember getting her help and feeling some purpose again, right? I started to feel like, you know, even though I was still getting drunk and everything else, I started to feel a little bit of purpose. Like I just felt like God was moving my feet, you know? And I was at her 6-month celebration, and I left there that day, and I knew that was January 13th or 12th of 2017. And I left there, and I said, that's it. You know, I need to get some help. I need to, you know, I need to get rid of what I think is the solution, which is causing all these problems in my life. and figure out another solution. And I didn't know what that was going to be. And basically, I did know of Alcoholics Anonymous. I did know of the 12 steps. I did know that there was, but I struggled. I was struggling with God. I had all these issues of me blaming God for things that happened in my life, and through a number of events, I dove back into this. Right, I was given the gift of desperation. Okay, which is hard to come by, but I was given it, and that meant that I was willing to give somebody else what I call spiritual consent to push me. Okay, so basically I let someone, you tell me to jump, I'm going to jump. You tell me to go over there and walk in a circle, I'm going to go over there and walk in a circle. Now, it wasn't comfortable. I had to get humble. I had to have an open mind. I had to be really, really willing to do whatever they told me to do, and that's what I did. And it's been difficult. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of a sudden the skies turned blue and everything got better. I had a lot of wreckage. I had financial wreckage. I had family wreckage. I had years of causing pain and destruction, which some of that, by the way, is still not better, to be fair. Okay, but what came was the miracle of what the 12 steps did for me. All right, and what that meant was. And I'll go through the steps real quick, and then we're gonna dive into this a little bit, right? So for me, the powerlessness was obvious, right? So we talk about powerlessness as losing the power of choice and control, okay? If either one of those things are occurring in your life with anything, meaning, I'm not gonna buy anything today from Home Shopping Club, okay? Or whatever the hell it is, whatever, I don't even know what it is anymore. But let's just say that example. I wake up today and under no circumstances am I buying something off that TV. And then I do. Technically, you've lost the power of choice, okay? And when you buy a couple things that day, you've probably lost the power of control, all right? So that's something that you could deem in your life that you're powerless over, okay? So the unmanageability was pretty easy. I was unemployable. I was living in an apartment in Seaside. I mean, let's face it, I didn't really need more evidence to figure out that my life was unmanageable. The next part was the hard part, right? The next part, which is step 2, right? I have to, and it was so amazing, and he talks about it, right? We come to believe in a power greater than ourselves. We come to believe. So what I had to do at that point, and I just had some great teachers in my life. He looked me in the face and he said, "Do you believe that I believe?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Okay, let's go." That's it. It wasn't that I had to make this, I had to be touched by Jesus to move forward at that point. I did not. I had to believe that somebody else has this power working in their lives, and maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that power could work in mine. That was enough, right? We talk about it all the time. Jesus talked about it, the mustard seed. It was just a mustard seed. That's all I needed. And then we get into the third step, right, where I turn my will and my life over to the care of God. What does that look like? People are like, "Oh my God, what? I'm turning my life over." For me, today, which this is transcended from when I started to what it is now. For me, every single day, when I am put in a position, and Donna will tell you this because I say it all the time, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Would Jesus give this guy the middle finger and beep the horn? Probably not. Okay? Would Jesus cut this lady off in the grocery store? Probably not. Okay? So that's slowly how today, what it looks like of me turning my will and my life over. I'm going to take you back, though, to when I was actually doing the step work, what that looked like. What it looked like was, we're going to clean the wreckage of your past. The only way to do that is to inventory it. Okay? So turning my will and my life over to the care of God back then was just taking direction to start doing inventory. And the inventory was real simple, right? Excuse my language, who pisses me off? And who, when I see, I continue to just get that, like, I re-feel, right? Who am I resentful at? and what places, what principles, all these things, right? And then I did a fear inventory and a sex inventory. And sex inventory is really a relationship inventory, right? How did I show up in relationships, right? More than anything else. I hate that they use the word sex in that. I really should just say relationship. But he does use that as the terminology. So in doing so, then sharing that with somebody else, what's come out of that, and we're going to get much deeper into that. I'm actually going to come in with some sheets and show you the mechanics of what that looks like and what happens when you go through this process. It's amazing, right? First of all, I became so aware of so many of these things that were driving my life, right? Like men don't cry. And I'm sitting here in front of how many people, most times, once a month, you'll see me crying at church. It just is what it is. But that was an old belief system that was driving my life, okay? And there's so many others. And then fears, right? I was angry in so many areas of my life because I was afraid that I was going to be like that person. I wasn't even angry anymore about what happened, right? There could have been a certain circumstance that happened. I always think about my dad, right? Me and my dad, I think we have a pretty good relationship today. I think that it could be a lot better, and it's something that I would love to work on. I wish sometimes he would show up with a little bit, but my job is to show up now, today. That's what my job is, And I look at all these things that I was like resentful at. And really what it came down to was, right, like I was afraid of being a bad dad. I was afraid of, being a bad son. And these fears were driving my life. And I was doing things to other people based off these fears. So all of a sudden, the harms that start to get caused in my life, it's like, well, wait a minute. That's because of that? Well, let's work on that. Let's figure out how we can resolve that issue. And that's what it did for me. And then from that, we find some character defects. Okay, and believe me, no offense, but everybody here has them. Okay, and what we ask really in step 7, and we get humble, and we realize that if we could have got rid of these character defects in step 6, we would have done it already. Okay, and if we believe at this point, because I'm going to tell you, the miracle starts to happen when you go through the steps right now. Once you do a 5th step, you start to feel the presence of God in your life. I don't care who you are. And all of a sudden, you start to realize that, hey, look, I have these things. I have full faith and trust in God. All of a sudden, some of them you start to realize that maybe God has them in your life, right? Maybe God has me sometimes be a little bit more sarcastic in certain areas because I bring humor to a situation. You don't know. I don't know. What I know is that I need to get as pure as I can through this process, and then I can God will show me what I should have and what I shouldn't have, okay? Because in 7, what we do is we humbly ask God to remove the character defects. We can't do it, okay? And that's what you're going to see through this whole process. There's certain things where we can put the effort in, right? I say this all the time. God will move mountains. You better bring a shovel. Okay? So where's the shovel in this process? It's writing the lists. It's being honest. But ultimately, God's going to do the work as long as you keep moving your feet. And where the rubber meets the road for most people is 8 and 9. Okay? And 8 and 9 is where, we make a list of people that we harmed. We become willing to make amends to them. And then in 9, we go out and make some of those amends. And that amends is a different amends, right? This is where Richard Rohr does an amazing job, and we'll really get deep into that, where it's like Jesus talked about this, right? It wasn't about, that's why I'm going to say something that I'm probably going to get in trouble for, but the Roman Catholic Church to me has missed it so much because it was about walking into this confession box and then, everything's okay. Right, I walk out, I get on my knees, I say a couple Hail Marys, Our Fathers. Okay, I'm good. Meanwhile, the 10 people that I pissed off, they're hurt. And I didn't do anything to fix that. And there's a lot of things where Jesus talks about the importance of that, of going and repairing that relationship. And that's what we do. And, it's about the willingness in that process. Because I got news for you. I've had doors shut in my face. I've had people tell me, listen, I don't give 2 shits about what, great, I'm glad you're on this path.
Go away. Yeah.
Beat it.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't happen all the time, okay? It has happened to me a handful of times out of many, many amends. I still get relief from that. Because when I walk away from that, I know that I was willing to make that approach. I was willing to sit down with somebody and tell them, because the amends process is a totally different process. It's like, hey, look, here's what by the way, here's what I think I did. Okay? This is what I think I did. I leave anything out? And that's a tough one to swallow. Right? I remember one of the first times I made my amends to my mother, and it was, I left a lot out.
Remembered.
And yeah, she remembered all right. She still remembers, by the way. And then through 10, 11, and 12 is where, the miracle of the 12 steps exists. Okay, we talked about a 10-step when we were kind of getting into, what that looks like, right? And I remember you saying how there was pain when you were doing that at night, that it was putting you in a state of like unhappiness because of the fact that you're thinking about the things throughout the day that you didn't do right. Like you wanted to think more about the things that you did well for the day, that you were grateful for.
It's depressing to realize how you don't measure up.
Yes. So one of the drawbacks to kind of introducing that 10-step the way we did is that there's a reason why it's number 10 and not number 1. So it's when you go through that process of those first 9 that you start to see the importance and how that works, so you won't be so destructive on yourself and more constructive with yourself. And 11 is something that I grow in every single day, that gets better, right, through prayer and meditation. I'm hoping some people read the book, so I'm kind of, it's through that I get to continue to deepen this relationship with this power, right? And I'll tell you how that changed for me. So it's so funny how I got the Good Shepherd. I'm going to tell that story real quick. So I had a decent relationship with my ex-wife. It's gotten worse. So I keep feeling like I'm getting healthier, but I guess the pain is the damage of what I've done. And believe me, I pray for her. I just think that just could. She doesn't have this. She doesn't have this blueprint of maybe visiting those resentments and maybe not re-feeling the pain every time she sees me, because I see it and I feel it. And so there was a period of time where we were like leaning on each other, for emotional support, because we were used to doing that, right? We were going through a divorce, but we were still kind of leaning on each other. And I had been going to the church in Seaside Heights, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, I think it's called. And Father Bart was a great guy. He was somebody who I would talk to and stuff like that. But there was this disconnect. I was leaving there, and I just wasn't, right? I was at a point where I stopped going to church. I stopped going to church. It was real easy for me, right? I was living in Seaside. Life was starting to get better. I was sober probably this time, close to a year. Everything was kind of slowly, one of the things that's really difficult for the alcoholic, drug addict, gambler, whoever it may be, when they put down their solution, which everybody else looks at as the problem, life around them could get better real quick, right? Believe me. Before you know it, you have a job, you have this, but what you don't have is the coping skills to deal with any of that, which is why so many people go back to the ease and comfort that comes from that, okay? Because you need to develop this relationship with God. That's the only person that's going to, I hear this all the time when people say, oh, you got to be careful, like with new people that walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Be careful talking about God. I'm like, oh, yeah? Well, he's their only chance. So I don't know what else to say. We don't have to talk about him now, but believe me, hopefully he gets him back in. Because if he's got that much of a problem talking about God now, he's going back there, okay? And that's why when you think about what Bill Wilson did about, right, a God of your understanding, and when you read how beautiful he wrote in there, Spirit of the universe, sunlight of the spirit, he danced around it in so many different ways to make it this broad highway that for me, wasn't Jesus. Just so everybody knows here, I did not come to Good Shepherd you know, with a cross around my neck. I just had this draw to Jesus, but there was a disconnect. There was a really, really bad disconnect. And she knew I wasn't going to church because I told her, I said, look, you know, I'm sick of going to this mass over there to talk about money all the time and how bad the church, you know, they need money. And she turned around and she says, you know, somebody came to, she was waitressing at Social 37 at the time. And she said that there were these two people that came in dressed like monks.
And they drank
And they were so nice.
wine.
She said, I got her card, and when I picked up my son the next time, I had the card, right? And I know, it's going to get me choked up. So, you know, listen, I at this point, because I didn't have this disconnect from God, things in my life were getting better, all right? But again, I had no connection. So I was getting pulled this way towards drugs and alcohol more than I was getting pulled towards God, right? Here I am going to church, going to confession, doing the things that I was taught to do my whole life, and it's not working. I'm not connected to God. So listen, let's face it, you know, this was a Hail Mary, right? I called the number and I said, you know, who are you? And, you know, why do you dress like a monk? and I remember, you know, just like spilling my guts to her. You know, like on the phone, you know, think about what would have changed if you didn't pick up the phone that day. You know, like how much changed. And all she said to me was, you know, just please come to Mass on Sunday. Please come to Mass and meet me. And I remember the first time I walked in, you know, here was like a special thing for me. And it's been that way. And the growth that's come with that, right? So then, you know, Father Anthony was here at the time, who grew up in Jersey City, and we kind of had a connection, and he used to always make me laugh. And then here comes this guy, Drew. You know, And I'm going to tell you, right, my thinking mind is judging already, because that's what I know how to do. All I know how to do is judge. I'm not, my open-mindedness was not there yet. And he's talking about the mind, right? He's challenging me, whether you believe it or not, every single week. And I remember coming in and being upset, like when he was saying Mass. I mean, I'm being totally honest. I would come in and I'd be like, oh man, you know, I want the funny guy. You know, I want the guy that's going to make me laugh. And then something happened, right? Thank God I had this willingness to want to deepen that relationship with him, because today I can tell you that, you know, he's changed my life. And you know, he's somebody who, as is Donna, that I know that they would do anything for me. These are people that I love today. These are not people, you know, that are, you know, I go to the church that they, you know, talk at. I mean, these are people that are in my life that I make a phone call to, and I've changed my life. But Drew, you know, I'll never forget this. I remember closing the door and saying, Drew, I don't believe in Jesus. What do I do, right? I'm at this church, everybody's singing. Like, I can't get with this. I don't believe that he was that there was this virgin and he walked the earth. Like, it's just not doing it. And thank God he didn't be like, well, there's the door.
Good it wasn't Father Jim.
You know, he turned around and he said, we started talking about the experiences that I was going through prior to this, and the changes, and how my vision was I was starting to see things differently. And he said, you know, then we started a little bit, like he gave me some stuff to read, and then we you know, and then we talked about, like Donna talked about in a couple homilies ago, about, you know, the humanity of Jesus, right? Like, why don't you surround yourself with you? Because nobody could deny that, right? There was a guy on this earth that has changed history. I mean, people followed him to death. So even if he didn't, let's just say I still had that same belief system, he's still someone to emulate your life after, right? You know, we talk about St. Francis, we talk about Mother Teresa. Well, you know, Jesus was somebody that I could get with that. And, you know, and the process has just been, you know, I can tell you today that my you know, I believe in both the divinity and the humanity of Jesus today. I'm still sometimes, like my old belief systems will creep in every once in a while, and like we'll do something here that's very ritual, and I retract a little bit, and it's something that obviously, see, that uncomfortability is where I know that I need to grow. That uncomfortability, that comes from doing this. Because through the process of being uncomfortable, every time I was uncomfortable came growth. Every single time in this process. So that's basically how I got here. So a little bit about Richard Rohr, right? So obviously he's a Franciscan priest, and he was frustrated with what he saw in the church. All right. And I can tell you that I share his feelings when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. So I'm going to bring it into Good Shepherd. Good Shepherd's great. This is a great place to come and fellowship and everything else. But if you're not having an experience with the kingdom of God through here, you're selling yourself short, okay? He saw that within the church. He saw that there were these people who were priests and nuns that had this disconnect. They weren't living in the kingdom of God. They were waiting to die to get there. And he saw through AA, which is amazing, that's where he started to have a transformation. Because he started to see these people and he wanted to figure out what was going on, right? Why are these people, why do they have so much faith and trust in God, but here's a priest and he doesn't? Why is the drunk? Doesn't make sense to me. Which forced him to do the research that leads to this book, okay? And we have that same problem right now today in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, we have the problem in Alcoholics Anonymous today that we have a bunch of people that come in with quote unquote a drinking problem, right? And we're saying come to meetings and fellowship, but we're not talking to them about where the recipe for the cure is, right? And I owe it for what God has done for me. I owe Alcoholics Anonymous to be that guy. Listen. If you know anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous and you mention my name, you'll see that I buck the system in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? I'm the guy who's like, listen, if you're not doing this deal, then you ain't doing the deal. You keep coming to these meetings, keep coming. You're going to probably pick up a drink one day. Or you're not a real alcoholic. Because if you don't suffer and have the spiritual malady that I have, that I need to seek ease and comfort from one or the other, and if I'm not getting it from God, I'm going to get it from I'm going to get, by the way, today, I get it from sugar. Okay? I can tell you that I've been blessed by God to not have I go everywhere. I work in a bar on the weekends. My best friend owns a bar in Seaside. I do the front door. I recoil. I've been promised that I recoil from a drink like they say, you recoil from it like a hot flame. Okay? I have no desire. That beer that somebody picks up, to me, I know what that is. That'll destroy my life. That's what it is. So I know that I'm the real, like they talk about in here, I'm the real alcoholic. I'm the guy that has this spiritual malady. There are some people that, maybe got a DWI. They come to AA. They don't have the spiritual malady. They're not torn in two directions like I was, where I need the relief and ease and comfort that comes from God, or I'm going to get it from booze. Today, though, I get ease and comfort from a package of M&Ms.
Girl Scout cookies.
Right? Or Girl Scout cookies. And I'm going to tell you that, and it's really something I'm working on, because I wake up a lot of days and I say, I'm not going to go to Wawa. I'm not. Right? I'm not going to go to Wawa, because I know if I go in Wawa, I like the chocolate chip cookie they make. And, and then what happens is I lose the power of choice throughout the course of the day. And then I pass a Wawa and I go in. And then what comes out of that? I eat that. I get a little ease and comfort. And then comes the guilt, the shame, the body shaming, right? This is why you're never going to be in shape. The mind starts to work on me. And if I don't start to work on this sugar thing, by the way, I will pick up a drink. That's what I've been taught. Because this is a problem in my life that I have powerlessness over, which is what we're talking about here. I need everybody here after this week to start thinking. I actually would encourage everybody here to make a list of things that you think you're powerless over. Okay? Make a list. What am I powerless over? Because the only way for you to accept the solution that we talk about in either one of these books is to believe that you have this problem. Okay? If you don't believe you have the problem, you're not going to accept the solution. That I promise you. So, I'm sorry, this is the uncomfortability part. I'm asking for you to find the areas in your life that are the problem. You don't have to share it with me. You don't have to tell me. If you want to, I encourage it because we can talk about it. Okay? And then we're going to talk about what's next and how do we get to experiencing. You know, I do share this all the time. I reached a point all of a sudden, I don't know when it was probably about 1.5 years into sobriety, where I was like, wow, I almost felt an unfair advantage. I'm going to wrap it up too in 2 minutes. I felt an unfair advantage in life. I felt like I had the blueprint that I've been searching for my whole life. I had something that was going to continue to drive me to this power no matter what. And it was kind of like the story I shared with you earlier about having a bad day at work and knowing that if I go to try to help others. See, God shows up. God shows up every single time in that scenario. Every time. So sometimes when I can't, through prayer and meditation, have this aura or this bell start ringing, and I go do something for somebody, all of a sudden God shows up in my life. So there was a period of about 1.5 years into sobriety where it was like, I felt like this weight had just been thrown off of me. Because for once in my life, I felt like I had some type of blueprint to be a regular earthling. Because I felt like a fish out of water my whole life. I walked into a room full of people and I felt like I was the only one there. And, you know, it's hard to be a husband. It's hard to be a father. It's hard to be a son. It's hard to be any of those things with that. That's the spiritual malady. That's what we're talking about. My spirit was sick. And until I figured out that there was some way to heal that spirit, who knows? You know, who knows? So just to give you guys, gals too, I should say. I'm sorry. I don't want to say guys all the time. I should say folks. That's what I used to tell people in the restaurant world. Say folks. It includes everybody. So, especially. So, what the goal here is this, all right? These chapters are short. I'm going to, starting next week, really, because we're running out of time, and it was okay. I told Donna that this week I really wanted to kind of pour it out there so you kind of knew, why am I so passionate about this? Because there's people that could sit up here and give you what their experience is, or they could tell you how to go navigate through this, but if you don't know that they've been to hell, and I promise you I've been, you might not accept what I'm telling you to do to get out of it, okay? And listen, I'm not saying anybody here has the troubles that I had, but what I can tell you is everybody here has the ability to experience what I've experienced through the blessings of the 12 steps. That I can guarantee you. You don't need to be a drunk. You don't need to be an alcoholic. You don't need to be down on your luck and, you know, living in the woods to experience the grace of God and live in the sunlight of the Spirit. Okay, and that's really what our goal is and what our goal is going to be over the next, I think it's 4 or 5 weeks, whatever we have scheduled. Okay, I'm really going to try to break the book up into the next couple weeks and getting deeper in it. One of the things I love that he does is he brings the steps back to Scripture. And when I started, I told you how I had this plan, right? I was going to go to Florida. I was going to outline this and all that nonsense. Then I sat down and I listened to the book again, and I started having another experience. And you know what came to me? Through contemplation and just sitting quiet? The relationship to all this. The fact that this is why this exists. And then he does a great job of explaining why this exists, or really this exists because of the Bible. And he brings it all together. And that's where I think the brilliance is in the book. And I'm really, really looking forward. I can't thank everybody enough for coming here. And even, you know, when I tell you, it is such a privilege and a blessing that I get to sit up here and do any of this. And I thank you. And
Thank you.
so I was gonna try to end every session with like a few minutes. If anybody had any questions, comments, or anything like that. We really only have 5 minutes. I do next week. I'm gonna have Donna send this out. Next week, the start time will be 2:00. Okay, we'll go to 3:00, and then we'll leave the 15 minutes. Is everybody kind of in agreement with that? Okay. All right, so then everybody won't be looking at me with that uncomfortable 15 minutes at the beginning. All right, because I had no idea what was going on. So, with 5 minutes left, so if you do want to share, please let's try to keep it in the spirit of giving some other people an opportunity to ask a question. Sure.
It's really alcoholism. My sister married an alcoholic, and she thought an alcoholic was someone laying in the street, you know. And they had 7 children, and he was always drunk. And then one time he got sick, went to the hospital, and she thought, oh, maybe that he's going to wake up, you know. The doc, and he said to the doc, Doc, can I just have a beer once in a while? The doctor said yes. So she just, but out of her 7 children, the daughter she had 6 boys and a daughter. The daughter's fine. There are, I say, 2 alcoholics in there. One, he was the kindest, nicest, smartest kid, and he was an alcoholic. The police forbid him to go back into the town. It was a nightmare. And he found faith in God. And now he's very close to the church. He has a family. But every single 6 of her boys, the one boy never got married. He's an alcoholic. The other boys, they're all married. They have children. They're the best fathers in the world. They drink on the weekends, but nothing, you know. So my poor sister went through hell. I mean, can you imagine having her husband and her sons? And the police were at her door all the time.
Yeah, I get to experience this, unfortunately, all too often, right? I'm at a wake once a month. And a lot of times, depending on the season, right, we get close to Christmas, I'm at one once a week. So, you know, it's a miserable disease, and there is that idea of whether it is hereditary, and you know, we could have that argument all day long. But, you know, something that I don't know how many of you drive through inner cities, but something to think about, right? When you drive through an inner city, what are the 2 things you see in inner cities?
Prostitutes and drugs.
True, you see all that, but you see liquor stores, right? Somebody said it. And you see houses of worship. Because the people, unfortunately, in those situations have nothing else. They get ease and comfort from God. The calamity of life, unfortunately, they don't, you know, most of them that have found fortune or whatever it may be that gets them out of there. But ultimately, what they have is they either get to choose God, ease and comfort that comes from God, faith and trust, or ease and comfort that comes from booze and drugs. And you know, it breaks my heart when you drive through and that's all you see. So it's something to always, you know, the evidence is all around us that those are the ways people choose ease and comfort. And I would encourage everybody to think about how do you, if you're struggling with figuring out what you're powerless over, what brings you ease and comfort? Okay? And I think we'll end with that, right? What brings you ease and comfort for next week? All right?